Yi Futian's entry into the Path River caused a great sensation in the Divine Palace. The disciples of the Divine Palace were all focused on this event. This person who had defeated Li Daozi, the first person of the current generation of the Sword Palace, had now gone to the most sacred place in the Divine Palace. Yi Futian's entry into the Path River caused a great sensation in the Divine Palace. The disciples of the Divine Palace were all focused on this event. This person who had defeated Li Daozi, the first person of the current generation of the Sword Palace, had now gone to the most sacred place in the Divine Palace. For so many years, only one person had stepped into it, and now he was in it. Shun Jing, a swordsman from Taishan Mountain. Would he be able to enter? Yi Futian had no idea that his trip had caused such great unrest. He didn't even know the exact place he wanted to go. He just had a feeling that this place was extraordinary. A place where hidden paths might certainly be suitable for cultivation. So he wanted to take a look. He even had doubts in his heart. Why is this place so quiet? He wondered. In the Path River, there was no one else but him, and there were no disciples of the Divine Palace. This left Yi Futian somewhat baffled. Were the disciples of the Divine Palace that lazy? Was it because they didn't cherish the spiritual resources in the Divine Palace? He had no idea about the kind of place that he had come to. It was not because the disciples of the Divine Palace did not want to come. It was a question if they could get in. The sword entered the Path River and drove toward the palace. In Yi Futian's present state, he thought that he would soon reach his destination. Although this river was very long, it could not be easily crossed. However, he found that even as the sword moved forward, it was still in Path River, and it seemed to stop when it reached the center of the river. Or rather, the distance to the palace ahead always remained the same. He looked down at the sword under his feet. The sword was still moving forward, even causing some ripples as it shuttled in the water. However, no matter how far he moved, it seemed that he was still in the same place. What's going on? Yi Futian looked confused. He couldn't get close. It seemed within reach, clearly in front of him, but at the same time, it seemed to be far beyond the horizon. But he was in the pinnacle of St. Plain, so there was no way he did not understand his own feelings. This time, the mysterious palace was real and solid, unlike the nebulous quality of the land of proving the way. If so, how could it be? He couldn't understand it. Unless there was way to prevent him? This was the only explanation. However, what kind of will of the way could possibly produce such a condition? Yi Futian appeared deep in thought, and he stopped. The sword did not move forward. Everything seemed to be standing still. Space will of the way. Yi Futian whispered. Only the space will of the way could produce such a spectacle. He and his sword were in a space of the great path, bound by the great path, unable to fathom its truth. But this time, he didn't even feel the existence of the space will of the way in reality. If there was really a space of the great path, then it must also exist in the void. Pst! The sharp sound of sword roar emerged, and swords appeared around Yi Futian's body. Some of them directly broke through the sky and shot toward the front, wanting to cross the Path River and reach the palace. However, he realized that although the swords were extremely fast, they could never reach the destination. He integrated his spiritual will into them, but he still couldn't sense the cause. Many swords now appeared at his feet. Yi Futian sat directly on the sword and closed his eyes, quietly experiencing everything around him, as if to imprint all that he saw in the Path River into his mind. If everything was so clear, then what was the power that prevented him from moving forward? Yi Futian himself also cultivated the way of space, but at this moment, he fell into the way of space again. It only showed that his way of space was still not quite where it needed to be, and was far from perfection. Otherwise, he would not have been trapped by the way of space. So close yet so far. Yi Futian's eyes were tightly closed, and everything seemed to have stopped. Time and space stopped flowing in Yi Futian's mind, as if he was the only one between heaven and earth at this moment. He sat there quietly. At this moment, he was like a lonely boat in the vast ocean. Loneliness surrounding him, he wanted to find the answer. As time passed, Yi Futian sat there as if he had never moved. This caused a lot of discussion inside the Divine Palace. Sure enough, and as expected, Even though Yi Futian had defeated Li Daozi, he was still trapped in the Path River and could move no further. This was Path River. It led to the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, and there were no other shortcuts. Only by crossing the Path River could one gain entry into the ancestral land. For many years, how many excellent characters wanted to enter but couldn't? Yi Futian's talent was widely recognized by people of the Divine Palace. Even if many of them were unhappy with him, they still had to acknowledge Yi Futian's powerful perception. However, this was the Path River after all. Sure enough, he was still trapped inside, unable to move forward. Even some others had gone to the place where the Path River was, and watched the figure, who was stuck in the Path River, unable to move forward. The figure sat on the sword seemed lonely. It was as if he was the only person in the world. Zhuang Hong also came. He looked at Yi Futian, and felt some strangeness. Where couldn't this guy go? But he had come to the Path River. Never mind that the Path River was difficult to cross, because even if he could, there was still the one that restrained inside to consider. But Yi Futian seemed to understand everything in this instant. There was no one at the Path River. This beyond reach alone was enough to repel countless geniuses, because they simply could not get across. It was just a short distance away, yet it was beyond reach. The sword didn't move, and Yi Futian didn't seem to have stopped moving at all. But he got it. He now knew what it meant to be beyond reach. What's going on? Just then, there was a cry of exclamation at the edge of the Path River, and many people looked in Yi Futian's direction in shock. It's getting closer, isn't it? They were shocked to find that Yi Futian was getting closer to the divine temple of the ancestral land. How could this be? He didn't seem to have moved. Someone frowned, puzzled. Moreover, Yi Futian was still approaching the divine temple of the ancestral land. He sat there as if he had done nothing at all. Awesome, Zhuang Hong praised. What an incredible display. Brother Zhuang, what is going on? A disciple from the Divine Palace asked. How would I know? Zhuang Hong replied. The man looked at him dumbfounded. If he didn't know what was going on, why the excitement? However, I could venture a guess, Zhuang Hong replied. Everyone at the Path River of the ancestral land knows that this place is beyond reach, probably because it has the way of space hidden within it. Therefore, the only thing that could unlock the way of space in this place is the way of space. To overcome the way with the way, Zhuang Hong's deduction was correct. Yi Futian opened his eyes, and saw that he was very close to the divine palace of the ancestral land. There was beyond reach in the Path River, and the only thing that could unlock it was to reach for the beyond. Yi Futian finally understood at this moment. It was not that no one wanted to come here, but that they could not get here. But how many at the divine palace could get through beyond reach? Beyond reach, reaching the beyond. Anyone who wanted to cross the Path River must first need to understand the way of space and unlock it. Except reaching the beyond, he couldn't think of any other ways to solve it. But perhaps other top geniuses had other solutions. The sword was already near the palace in front, and every time he moved forward, he was getting closer. At this moment suddenly, another invisible force descended, causing the forward-moving sword to stop. Time and space seemed to have once again fallen into a state of arrest. This time it was not a stillness dictated by him, but was forced upon him. Everything seemed to have stopped flowing. Even the will of the great path between heaven and earth had stopped. In Yi Futian's perception, everything seemed to disappear at this moment. It was as if there was only this Path River in the world. There was no path, only river. The swords beneath Yi Futian disappeared into thin air. He was suspended alone on the Path River with no will of the way. It was as if he could float there naturally. But except for this, there was just nothingness. What is this now? Yi Futian was a little speechless. Was this Path River so difficult to cross? It was just that beyond reach seemed simple and easy to unlock. But the truth was that it was extremely difficult. If it was any other person, they might have never been able to take that step. However, he had just made that step and immediately fell into such a situation again. Where was this exactly? What place is this Path River? He wondered. And what exactly was that sacred palace in front of him? Why was this place so difficult to enter? It seemed that no one came here, not because of their laziness in cultivation, nor because it was an ordinary place for cultivation, but because everyone knew that they may not be able to cross. So what place was this? What was the sacred palace in front of the Path River? What would happen after crossing over? When his thoughts turned to this, Futian was a little jittery. He suddenly realized that the place he came for this time might not be quite so innocuous. But the matter at hand seemed to be how he could cross the Path River to reach that sacred place. Futian, who seemed to have been stuck in a space of absolute stillness, lifted his feet to walk forward. There were ripples under his feet, as if he was stepping on water. There was a booming sound coming from inside his body. It was as if the way inside his body was extending outward, moving forward. However, this was the same situation as before. Shockingly, Futian found he was standing in the same place, unable to move forward. Futian's face was becoming incredibly entertaining to behold. This time, it was obvious that they were not being trapped by beyond reach, which could not be unlocked by the method used previously. So, what was it this time? He stopped again. Many disciples of the Divine Palace gathered by the shore and watched Futian's every move. It would not be easy to cross the Path River. Just as they were thinking about it, traces of invisible breaths inside Futian's body spread throughout the world and seemed to link with heaven and earth. Soon, he seemed to once again getting a grip on perceiving the real world. Lifting his feet, Futian took a step, and his body disappeared from where he was. His figure crossed the Path River directly and appeared at the end of the Path River. Countless eyes were fixated on this scene. Everyone looked at Futian in amazement. Was it really as simple as stepping over? This made a lot of people feel strange. In all these years, the Path River, that had only been crossed by one person in the past, had it really blocked Futian? At this moment, had Futian really crossed the Path River? Ahead, there should be other obstacles blocking his way. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Once Futian took this step to cross the Path River, beyond reach and reaching the beyond seemed to be separated by one step. Once Futian took this step to cross the Path River, beyond reach and reaching the beyond seemed to be separated by one step. Once Futian took this step to cross the Path River, beyond reach and reaching the beyond seemed to be separated by one step. Once Futian took this step to cross the Path River, beyond reach and reaching the beyond seemed to be separated by one step. Unable to pass, he would always be in the Path River. But if he was able to, he could cross it in one step. At this time, Futian was standing in front of a golden great path. The Divine Palace in front stood towering above the sky, magnificent and sacred, impervious to spiritual will. There were palaces standing on the left and right of it. To Futian, each palace exuded the might pressure of the Great Path. This golden Great Path was an ancient Great Path, which contained extremely powerful might of the Great Path. To walk through might not be an easy task. Furthermore, the end of this ancient golden Great Path was sacred and ethereal. There seemed to be someone standing there, but it was somewhat unreal. Was someone finally there? It seemed that someone was here after all. At this time, Futian had realized that this place was unusual, and whoever could come was definitely the most top genius at the Divine Palace. Futian didn't know that, at the moment, only one person had ever come to this ancestral land of the Divine Palace before him. It was the premier person of the current generation of the Divine Palace, hailed as the most unparalleled genius of Upper Heaven's realm. Unparalleled in the world meant overshadowing Tianyu and Li Daozi. With everyone else at one level and him at another level, he could not be called unparalleled. What is this place? Futian was becoming more and more curious. What exactly was this sacred place? Could it be that it was the place of cultivation for the great figures of the Divine Palace? Or were there hidden secrets in the Divine Palace? No matter what place this was, he wanted to go in and take a look. Futian lifted his feet and walked forward. Just one step, and there was an extremely violent storm of the Great Path that came from this ancient golden Great Path. There was great pressure everywhere on this ancient Great Path. Futian had a feeling that divine gods were standing there, guarding the front of the ancient path that he walked on. All these statues of the gods seemed illusory, and yet solid at the same time. His spiritual will felt it, and the oppressive forces of the great path that bloomed from it also felt so real. This moment gave Yi Futian a familiar feeling, like the feeling he had when he was at a place of comprehension in the Divine Palace, Celestial Worthy Mountain, where he met Zhuanghong. But the coercion of the gods here was even more real and terrifying. It was stronger than that of Celestial Worthy Mountain. The blood inside Yi Futian's body roiled and roared, making a booming sound of the great path. He lifted his feet, and forcing his way forward, he let out a violent roar. His clothes fluttered, and his hair was flying. His body seemed to bear a great amount of weight, and it was not easy to take even one step forward. Boom! Yi Futian moved forward one step at a time. Each time he took a step, there was a roaring sound of the great path that burst from his body. The great path was unified into one. It turned into a path of boundless power, forcing each step forward. He walked past a palace, but on this road of the golden great path, this distance seemed insubstantial. The road of the illusory great path seemed so long in his eyes. At this moment, Yi Futian suddenly developed a strong sense of crisis. In the perception of will, he seemed to perceive a ghostly figure again. It was as if the god of the underworld appeared directly in his mind. He seemed to see a pair of ghostly eyes, piercing his mind and attacking his spiritual soul. This is... Yi Futian's face showed concern. On his journey to the trial, he had met a direct disciple from the Divine Palace, Bai Xiu, who seemed to be a disciple of Lord Underworld. So what kind of ability was this? There were all the ways preached by the Divine Palace hidden within this ancient road of the Great Path. Various types of abilities erupted here, and transformed the ways to attack those who were coming forward. If so, would he be subjected to later attacks of melody, sword method, or any other aggressive attacks? The flesh and spiritual soul had to brave tremendous force of oppression at the same time. Yi Futian struggled to move forward under such oppression. Sure enough, he had not taken a few steps before he heard a melody. The great path resonated with it, and sharply increased the intensity of the previous oppression. Boom! Under the terrific impact of the great path, and its power, Yi Futian's body stumbled backward. He slid several steps before he could get a hold of himself. His brows were knit tightly together. His eyes glanced at the ancient road of great path ahead. Was this road really that difficult to get through? But just exactly what road was this? One had to withstand all kinds of attack methods of the Divine Palace. And the combat strength of each force seemed to be determined according to his own strength, and the strength of his realm. The stronger he was, the stronger the attack power of the great path. There was nowhere to hide. Yi Futian stopped. Instead of rushing forward, he took his time to adjust his breath. Previously crossing the path river required comprehension, but now what really mattered was one's own true great strength. There were no shortcuts on this road, and there were no tricks to get around it. Forcing his way through was the only option. At this time, on the other side of the path river, many were standing on the bank of the river. They looked ahead, but Yi Futian was no longer visible. Yi Futian had already disappeared in the path river. Has he gotten over and entered the ancestral land? Someone asked. Not yet. A genius talent who knew something about Path River shook his head and said, It's just a small step to cross the Path River. The road afterward is even more difficult to walk. More difficult? Someone mused. Then why did this Path River trap so many other extraordinary characters? Difficulty is relative. It is not that the Path River was not difficult to cross. Even many of the disciples of the Path Boat at the Divine Palace could not cross the Path River. There are only very few who could cross. Look, someone is trying right now. The speaker pointed ahead, and there were already several people who were walking toward the Path River. When Yi Futian crossed, they wanted to try it themselves also, but they were still there, unable to advance after the first step. So, how difficult is it to get into the ancestral land? For so many years, there was only one person who entered it. It was more than just difficult. The person next to him said thoughtfully. That person looked in the direction of Path River when he heard this. How outstanding was that unusual character, who had crossed the Path River, and entered the ancestral land of the Divine Palace. Even the disciples of the divine palace had not many opportunities to see him, much less speak to him. He was not just a direct disciple, but the disciple of the 9 halls. The 9 halls taught one person jointly, unheard of in the divine palace. It was said that the divine palace intended to train him to become the true premier person in the upper heavens realm in the future. He was also moving toward that goal. No one else could surpass him, as it was difficult enough to even catch up with him. He was in his own realm. No one else could be mentioned with him in the same breath. After rumors spread that he was a descendant of the divine gods, some people claimed that there was divine blood in his body. Some even said that he was the reincarnation of the Almighty. No matter the rumors, it all served as a testament to his strength. Today, an outsider appeared in the divine palace, and also had forced his way into the ancestral land of the divine palace. He had already crossed the Path River. Would the two of them meet in the ancestral land? Would Shenjing, a swordsman from Taishan Mountain, cross the road? It was probably very difficult. Indeed, incredibly difficult. Futian was still in front of the golden ancient road of the Great Path at this time. His body was radiant all over, and there was a roaring sound of the Great Path resounding inside his body. There was a strong and powerful breath of the Great Path circulating inside of him. His entire person seemed to have turned into a sword, an indestructible and omnipresent sword. The sword moved forward. It traversed the void and stepped onto the ancient road of the Great Path. Extreme pressure of the Great Path came forth and slammed on him. But from inside Futian's body, there was a whistling sound of the sword. Sword will reach for the sky. It crossed through the pressure of the Great Path and continued to shuttle forward without slowing. On the contrary, he seemed to want to speed up and pass through it quickly. Boom! The melody sounded again. That was the power of divine sound, which caused the Great Path to resonate in unison and expanded its oppressive forces. Pst! Sharp and shrill sounds were heard, and Futian's body also seemed to emit the sounds of melody, resonating with the sword. A power of the fleeting swordsmanship now swept out and defied the Great Path. All around Futian, a terrifying storm of the Great Path now surged. Boom, boom, boom. This ancient road of the Great Path was alive, and it seemed to be able to perceive everything that Futian was doing. As Futian accelerated forward, godlike statues appeared at the same time. An infinite sword will erupted and swept toward Futian. Bang! Futian felt this continuing increasing strength, and he suddenly stomped. The Great Path inside his body roared, and the sound of a thundering elephant came out. It resonated with the Great Path. The divine elephant stomped on the sky. It was like a bona fide divine elephant had come down to the world. The shadow of the divine elephant shrouded the body, towering like a demon god, stabilizing the body by sheer willpower. It continued to step forward savagely. This was the secret method of the divine elephants, the divine elephant stomping the sky. If this ability had erupted outside, Tianyu should have recognized him easily. But according to his observations of the divine palace, it was true that it did not interfere with the quarrels of the outside world, and did not participate in the friction between disciples. Otherwise, as an outsider, he would not have been allowed to wreak such havoc in the divine palace, plunder many treasured lands to cultivate, and beaten many of divine palace's own disciples. No elders had come forward to mediate, but had just let them do whatever they wanted. Therefore, the grudge between him and Tianyu would not be mediated by the divine palace. It did not matter if the divine palace knew his identity. He seemed to be goaded by this ancient road of the Great Path to become extremely competitive. The more he was not allowed to set foot in it, the more he wanted to force his way through. Under the technique of divine elephant stomping the sky, he was even more centered, and the power of the Great Path was more violent and terrifying. Every step he took shocked the earth and suppressed all the offensive attacks. He would like to see how the road of the Great Path could block his way. Boom, boom, boom. Statues descended, and the entire ancient road of the Great Path was full of incomparable power. On this road of the Great Path, there was a tremendous storm. The Great Path roared between heaven and earth, trying to destroy all existence. In Futian's mind, godlike statues appeared. At this moment, he was withstanding such indescribable pressure of might. The celestial soul attraction also bloomed, and the divine will rushed toward the sky. To counter against the attacks of the divine will within the great path, the divine elephant stomping the sky was integrated into the momentum of heaven and earth. Every step was earth-shattering, and the sword will of the great path surrounded his entire body. Yi Futian's entire body was holy and radiant, like the furnace of the great path. Each step he took was forcibly passing through this golden road of the great path. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In the golden ancient road of the great path, the roaring sound of the great path continued as Yi Futian forced his way forward. He used all the will of the way that his body could muster in order to fortify his own might to the extreme. His goal was to cross the golden ancient road in the most aggressive manner possible and reach the end. In the golden ancient road of the great path, the roaring sound of the great path continued as Yi Futian forced his way forward. He used all the will of the way that his body could muster in order to fortify his own might to the extreme. His goal was to cross the golden ancient road in the most aggressive manner possible and reach the end. Those elusive and surreal statues collapsed and shattered, and the pressure that had descended finally dissipated completely. Yi Futian stood at the end of the ancient road, which was also in front of that sacred palace. A holy and solemn atmosphere enveloped this space. Faintly, the ancient noble atmosphere could be felt, which made Yi Futian even more certain that this place was very likely very important in the divine palace. It seemed it was fate that he had mistakenly broken into it as a place of comprehension and spiritual cultivation. He thought it was a place of common comprehension before, but he did not expect that it would be so difficult to get in. Judging from the level of defense, could other disciples of the divine palace step in here? If the answer was no, he could totally believe that. But ahead there seemed to be a person. The great doors of the sacred yet ethereal palace were wide open, but that figure sat outside the palace. He was dressed very simply, and his hair casually fell on his shoulders. He sat atop the stairs with his eyes closed, not releasing any breath released from his body. Although Yi Futian was here, he still sat there quietly, as if he was completely unaware of it at all. It was as if he was the only person in this world. Yi Futian glanced at the man in front of the palace above the stairs, and all he saw was his back. Although he did not know the man, he could feel his loneliness. He sat there as though he were independent of this world, that all the entanglements of the world had nothing to do with him. What kind of realm was this? One was reluctant to disturb his cultivation, even in the slightest. Here, it seemed that any little movement would be a transgression. Yi Futian stood there quietly for a moment. He then slowly raised his feet and walked up the stairs, step by step, toward the upper ground. After a while, he came behind the figure, facing the sacred palace that was in front of them. It was a palace filled with great mystery. The cultivator who had been sitting there, had he entered it already? The person seemed to have been sitting here for a long time, so he should have gone inside already. Yi Futian looked at him again, and when he saw that the other was still irresponsive, he raised his feet and prepared to walk past him. "You are not a disciple of the divine palace?" At this time, a voice came out, and it was from the mysterious figure who had been sitting there. His voice was clear and powerful. It was as if it could imprint itself onto the minds of the others. Even though he was speaking, he sat there with his eyes closed, not turning his head. He did not even look at Yi Futian. "No," Yi Futian replied. "I was invited by the divine palace for the trial, and then entered the divine palace to cultivate and came here. May I ask, what is this place?" Yi Futian asked. He was becoming more and more curious. What was this place? It was so mysterious, solemn, and magnificent that even the most genius talents could not come here at all. "Ancestral land. Divine temple," the man answered. Yi Futian heard his words, and his heart trembled slightly. Even though he had guessed that this place was highly unusual, the response still shocked him. The ancestral land of the divine palace, the divine temple. Divine palace was the premier holy land in upper heaven's realm, as well as its most prestigious holy place for spiritual cultivation. This was the ancestral land of the divine palace. No wonder it was so difficult to get in. Just that river and the ancient road of the Great Path alone were enough to deter most people. It was basically impossible for the disciples cultivating at the divine palace to come. He had come accidentally, but the figure sitting in front of him was surely an exception as well. If not a disciple of the divine palace, then don't enter the ancestral land of the divine palace. Go back, the figure continued. His voice was extremely calm, without any trace of emotion. It was as if stating something that was extremely ordinary, and his tone did not betray any feelings. Futian didn't get angry when he heard the response. It was not entirely unreasonable. The ancestral land was of great significance to principalities of spiritual cultivation, and it was unlike ordinary places of cultivation, as it may truly contain the core of inheritance. Since he was not admitted to the divine palace to cultivate, he was not a disciple of the divine palace. It would be inappropriate to say that he was seeking inheritance in the ancestral land. However, it had taken him a lot to get here, and to not enter now as he was right in front of the door was, more or less, an unreasonable request. Although in theory, it was inappropriate for him to enter the ancestral land of the divine palace, the divine palace had not stopped him after all. The guides had also said that any location was allowed so long as one could reach it. Therefore, he had gotten here with his own power, and he would enter the ancestral land as long as he could. He did not consider that against the rules of the divine palace. I still want to go in and take a look, Futian said. The other did not respond. Futian looked ahead and lifted his feet, walking toward the divine temple. He spat. Just because one is not a disciple of the divine palace, does not mean they should not enter the ancestral land of the divine palace. However, the elders of the divine palace once said that as long as one could enter, then one may enter. So my apologies in advance. As he was speaking, he continued to move forward, wanting to enter the ancestral land. Quite right. As long as you are able to enter, you may enter. However, whether you can enter the divine temple is not really decided by you. At this time, a hollow and ethereal voice came and sounded in Futian's ears. He glanced at the person in front of him, frowning. The person who spoke was not the one in front of him. There were others in the divine temple. He stopped advancing. His eyes were fixed on the divine temple. What's your name? That ethereal voice was heard again. This time, he faintly felt that the person who spoke was the divine temple itself, not the figure who was in front of him. It was someone using the temple to speak. Shen Jing of Taishan Mountain, Futian replied. Wrong, the other responded. Futian's expression changed. How? He asked. You are not a cultivator from Taishan Mountain, nor are you Shen Jing, the other said. Futian's heart trembled slightly. Suddenly, caution flashed across his eyes. He refocused his eyes. I did come from Taishan Mountain, Futian responded. Everything is an illusion. Is it true just because you came from Taishan Mountain? The other continued. Futian understood that his disguise might have been detected by the other. He felt as though, standing before this divine temple, and being shrouded in that sacred breath, he no longer had any secrets. Everything would be easily exposed. What is true and what is false? Futian continued. Is what's true and false really that important? It didn't matter what his true identity was. If the divine palace did not participate in external disputes, then it mattered not who he was. Whether he was from Taishan Mountain or the heavenly mandate realm, there was no difference to the divine palace. The other was silent for a moment, as if to contemplate Futian's statement. A few moments later, a sigh came from the divine temple. You are right. What is true and what is false? The world is false, and so is the great path. What is the point of pursuing the truth? After a moment of silence, the other let out a gentle sigh. It was a sigh that made everyone felt a sense of desolation. Futian was surprised when he heard this. What did it mean? The world was false, and the great path was also. He didn't understand. I don't understand. Futian looked in front of him and said, Why do you cultivate? The other did not respond to Futian directly, but asked instead why he cultivated. Futian also asked himself for what did he cultivate. He thought about it for a moment, but realized that he understood nothing. In the past, I cultivated in many things, and it is the same now, but my mentality at the moment is that I must cultivate. There are too many things that require cultivation. Yi Futian sighed with emotion. It was as if he no longer remembered his original intention for cultivation. What for? The pride of being born an emperor? He seemed to have forgotten the lofty ambitions he once had. Now he was asked the reason for his cultivation. It was mostly that time was carrying him forward, and that he no longer had a choice not to cultivate. I had to cultivate. A low mumble was heard as if to discern Yi Futian's answer. This reflection told the stories of many cultivators. Out of those who cultivated in the world, how many still remember their original intention? Too many of them were forced to continue with their cultivation. Sailing against the currents, if not advancing, retreating was the only outcome. Yet retreat was not possible. That mysterious breath disappeared, and the ethereal voice seemed to no longer exist. Elder? Yi Futian asked, but there was no response. May I enter? Yi Futian asked. There was still no response. It was as if the other had completely fallen into a state of quietude, leaving Yi Futian to choose for himself. At the very most, he probably would not interfere. I will assume that Elder's silence means agreement. Yi Futian bowed slightly and said. Since there was no outward disagreement, then it was up to him. As long as he could enter, he would enter. As he was speaking, Yi Futian continued to move forward. Yi Futian passed by the figure who was sitting there, trying to walk past him. However, at this moment he suddenly stopped. An extremely powerful force of the great path fell on him, and compelled him to stop. As his eyes slowly moved, Yi Futian looked at the figure sitting there, and on the other's body, an extremely bright divine light was released. Boom! An extremely unbridled breath slammed into Yi Futian's body. It even rushed into his spiritual will. The breath of the great path inside his body roared as if it encountered a great threat, hence the roar. The young man who had been sitting there opened his eyes. He looked forward. Anyone who was not a disciple of the Divine Palace had no right to enter the ancestral land of the Divine Palace. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1553, Huangzhong. Chapter 1553. Huangzhong. On the bank of the Path River, many Divine Palace disciples showed up, and they all gazed at the Path River in the distance. Now nobody knew what happened to Yi Futian. Had he stepped into the divine temple of the ancestral land? Had he met that person? Was he having a difficult time? There were many figures in the Path River at this time, and some talented cultivators had already entered the Path River. Among them, someone had even crossed the Path River and embarked on the Golden Road, which made many people watch in awe. However, the person was not a disciple of the Divine Palace, but from the outside. He was the disciple of the Golden Divine Nation, Gai Shir. At this moment, Gai Shir was stopped by the Golden Ancient Road of Path. He was bathed in golden divine light, and golden beams were shot from his eyes. He looked straight forward. Even though his cultivation in martial arts was accomplished, he still could not break through the Golden Road, and was trapped here. He saw that Yi Futian had walked out of the ancient road, and stepped in front of the palace in front of him. Besides Yi Futian, there was another figure. Gai Shir had heard of that man. Although this person rarely walked outside, he was very famous. Even though he had not yet become a Renhuang, he had already attracted the attention of the world, especially among the top powers who all knew his name. Gai Shir's elders also often mentioned this person to him. Some thought that he would inherit the position of the Divine Palace Lord, and some said that he would not stay in the Divine Palace forever, that there would be a place for him in the higher heavens realm, the center of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. They all gave high praise to him. He was the disciple of the 9 palaces, jointly cultivated by all masters of the palaces. He was a symbol of a generation. Before, Gai Shir was somewhat dissatisfied when he first heard about him, and had sought opportunities to fight with him. This time, he also wanted to meet him in the Divine Palace. However, the person had entered the ancestral land, but he was blocked outside. Not only that, but he also met another person on this trip, Shen Jing of the Taishan Mountain. Shen Jing defeated him, and stepped on the golden ancient road. Guy sure began to question himself. Could it be that he was inferior to those two? Thinking of this, his body became more dazzling in the divine light, and he continued striding forward. He wanted to walk there. Behind him, there even appeared many phantoms of the ancient golden deities, whose might suppressed the world. The sigh of the deities came, which made the might of the great path burgeon from his body. He immediately stepped forward and set off a storm of the great path. He would not yield to anyone, and did not think he was inferior to others. Read more chapter on VIP novel. Calm Yi Futian looked at the figure sitting forward and asked, "What do you mean?" The men of the divine palace didn't stop him, but this disciple of divine palace sat here and wanted to stop him? The person didn't speak, still sitting there quietly. He looked at the palace in front, with a pair of eyes lacking luster. He said, "You should retreat." He didn't explain why, but just wanted to let Yi Futian retreat. Looking at him, Yi Futian could feel that this lonely figure seemed to contain ultimate pride. The great path in Yi Futian's body roared. He watched the person and continued moving forward. He didn't say anything either. Even the elders of the divine palace didn't care. So how dare a disciple of the divine palace tell him to retreat? However, he could tell that this person was strong, very strong, and might even be the strongest disciple in the divine palace. He was more powerful than Li Daozi, who gave him much pressure. Otherwise he would not be here. However, even so, how dare he let Yi Futian who had come here go back? Since he had come to the divine shrine of the ancestral land, Yi Futian had to take a look inside. "My name is Huang Zhong," the person in front of Yi Futian said. His voice was sonorous like the bell of the great path. The moment his voice fell, there seemed to be countless golden ancient bells appearing between the heaven and the earth. The sound circulated around the world, and completely wrapped Yi Futian inside. The bells rang through the world, and the sound of the great path roared. The destructive storms of the great path directly attacked Yi Futian, forming one giant storm of the great path. Yi Futian instantly felt a terrifying force of attack on the great path. It was not only from the flesh, but also from the soul. That person was standing still, and didn't even look back at Yi Futian. He was looking forward, and those ancient bells of the great law just rotated around his body frantically. The power of the attack was just the killing power of the great path, brought by the sound of bells. Those killing powers were like golden lightning, splitting the void sky and breaking the souls of the deities. This attacking power of the great path was stronger than Li Daozi's sword. Yi Futian could feel that Huang Zhong had indeed reached the limit between Nirvana and Renhuang plains. The ancient bells of the path all over the sky were transformed by the mind, and the roaring might in his body seemed to become light of the wheel of the great path. This person might have already become half a Renhuang, and was only a step away from the Renhuang plain. In fact, Yi Futian still underestimated Huang Zhong's level. Huang Zhong had been in his current plane for many years, and he could actually enter the Renhuang plain at any time, even at this moment. But he still chose not to enter the Renhuang plain, because he wanted to build a different divine wheel of the great path. Only in this way, after entering the Renhuang plain, could he be different from other Renhuang figures, and have a higher starting point. He was born extraordinary, so he was supposed to do extraordinary things. The Renhuang plain people dreamt of others was nothing important to him. Even if he became a Renhuang, he would just want to be a peerless one. The fairy soul bloomed from Yi Futian's body, and there was fairy light shining around his body, as if a fairy phantom showed up. At the same time, the sound of divine elephants roared in his body. The great path roared, and there seemed to be numerous phantoms of divine elephants that suppressed the eternal sky. Divine elephant stomping the sky was released, and Yi Futian forcibly moved forward. The power of the divine elephant swept out with the dazzling sword of immortal souls, annihilating the light of the great path. Huang Zhong slowly turned around and looked at Yi Futian. He still looked so ordinary, but the light of the path surrounding his body was so unusual. This was the first time Huang Zhong turned around to look at Yi Futian and feel the life force from his body. He said, "Divine elephant stomping the sky skill of the heavenly mandate realm elephant clan. Celestial soul attraction of celestial gate of vast heaven, Swordsmanship of Taishan Mountain. Yi Futian heard Huang Zhong's words and showed surprise. A real top-level talented figure like him could recognize the unique abilities being released at one glance. He had much more knowledge than normal people. Here was the higher heavens realm, and Huang Zhong cultivated in the Shangxiao Divine Palace. Yet, he could easily recognize two abilities obtained from the Heavenly Mandate realm, which reflected how vast his knowledge was. It seems that you are from the Heavenly Mandate realm, Huang Zhong continued. Divine Elephant Stomping the Sky and the Celestial Soul Attraction came from the Demon Divine Elephant clan and the Fairy Power Celestial Gate of Vast Heaven, respectively. Still, this person could use both of them, so he could tell Yi Futian was not a simple person. It was no wonder he could get here. I'm from the Heavenly Mandate realm. Yi Futian. In the palace, the lingering voice came out again, which made Yi Futian stunned. He felt quite impressed in his heart. In front of the great people of the Divine Palace, not only was the technique of disguise easily seen through, but after he showed his skills, his true identity was also easily recognized. But this was also normal. Huang Zhong was a disciple of the Divine Palace, and although he might not know what happened in the Heavenly Mandate realm, the battle of the Heavenly Mandate realm was very influential. It even affected the whole political pattern of the Heavenly Mandate realm. Some disciples of the Divine Palace were also there. Elders of the Divine Palace must know about the event, and maybe had been concerned about the matter, so it was normal for them to recognize him. Sir, since you know me, you should understand that I used the name of Shen Jing, given my current circumstances. Please forgive me. Yi Futian looked at the shrine and said, since the other side knew him, then he should also know about the disintegration of the Celestial Gate, and could understand why he was disguised. The other side was silent for a moment, and Huang Zhong did not continue to attack. And then, another voice came from the shrine. The two most legendary descendants of the Heavenly Mandate realm today are Yi Futian and Gu Donglu. Now one of them is here. The person standing in front of you is the most legendary person of the young generation of the higher heavens realm. It could be accidental, but it could also be inevitable, the voice said from the shrine. The most legendary figure was destined to meet the same legendary character, because they had no other opponents. It was destiny. Yi Futian glanced at Huang Zhong when he heard these words. This person was hailed as the most legendary figure of the younger generation in the higher heavens realm. No wonder he was here alone, and he was so powerful. Although they hadn't started to fight, Yi Futian could feel strong pressure from him, far from what Li Daozi could offer. It seemed that this person was not at the same level as Li Daozi. Now I get it, Huang Zhong whispered as if he also felt relieved. No wonder Yi Futian could come here. Was it because he was one of the most legendary figures in the Heavenly Mandate realm? Even so, since his realm was far superior to that of Yi Futian, if the two confronted each other, it would still be unfair. Looking at Yi Futian's figure, Huang Zhong raised his hand, and the ancient bells of the Great Path suddenly covered the sky and chimed together, like making a chant of the Great Path. Terrifying golden lightning madly thrust out. Above the sky, there seemed to be many towering phantoms showing up like real deities. Huang Zhong's finger pointed at Yi Futian, and there seemed to be golden divine wheels of the Great Path sweeping out. They suppressed the eternal world, breaking the void sky, and destroying the souls. At this moment, everything seemed to be on the brink of collapse. The light of the deed of thorough comprehension exploded from Yi Futian's body, and the might of the Great Path was released to the limit, and a majestic giant phantom of the shocking divine elephant appeared. He raised his palm to bombard the void sky, and the elephant rushed out. The fleeting divine sword also swept out to defend the approaching attack. Clang! It seemed that as the ancient bell of annihilation sounded, the wheel of the Great Path destroyed everything. Giant phantoms of the elephants collapsed and shattered, and the light of the sword was annihilated into nothingness. In front of the ancient bell of the Great Path, everything should be shattered into nothingness. Clang, clang, clang. The bell resounded through the world, and the sound of destruction lingered for a long time. Yi Futian's body roared and flew out of the shock. The body was about to burst, but there was a strong might wrapping around the body, and sustaining his life force. His body descended from the stairs, but he still looked up at Huang Zhong. With the physique of the Great Path, the soul of the Great Path, Huang Zhong was not just half a step from becoming a Run Huang. It could even be said that he was but a line away from the Run Huang plane. He stood there and took a glance at Yi Futian, then turned around and sat there again. His eyes were closed as if nothing had happened just now. "Go in," Huang Zhong said. He didn't stop him anymore. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters." Yi Futian glanced at Huang Zhong and didn't know what he meant. Previously he wanted to stop him, but after he shot, now he just stopped. Yi Futian glanced at Huang Zhong and didn't know what he meant. Previously he wanted to stop him, but after he shot, now he just stopped. With his ability, if Huang Zhong wanted to stop Yi Futian, it was not easy for Yi Futian to break into the shrine. Huang Zhong gave up and did not hinder his way. Yi Futian retrieved his thoughts and kept walking forward toward the shrine where his thought could not invade. Yi Futian stepped into the shrine, and an extremely strong sense of the Great Path enveloped his body, and the will was very intense. Yi Futian looked up into the void sky and could perceive that there were endless ancient characters of the Great Path dripping down. His eyes became extremely bright. He was able to see through the nothingness. This world seemed to have changed accordingly as well. The infinite characters floating between the sky and earth seemed to contain some kind of mysterious power. They are all laws of the Great Path. Yi Futian thought, his heart trembling. Here was the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, the Holy Shrine. No wonder Huang Zhong did not allow himself to set foot in it. The real ancestral shrine contained the true essence of Divine Palace. In such a place, there were no guards to stop him. Huang Zhong also came here to comprehend the path. And of course, even the golden road of the Great Path itself could stop countless people. Yi Futian kept walking forward. Among the endless characters floating between the sky and the earth, there were also some statues, like the deities he'd seen before. Whether it was Celestial Worthy Mountain or the Sword Mountain, or the power released by Huang Zhong, they all somewhat shared similarities. It was as if they all came from this shrine. Sword Lord. Yi Futian walked to a statue and murmured. The infinite sword spells floated between the sky and the earth, and turned into flowing rivers of swords. He had the same feeling once in the Sword Comprehension Mountain. The statue was also engraved with handwriting, which recorded the life of this heroic figure. Wanlu Sword Lord invented the 49 techniques of comprehension sword, and derived infinite sword skills from the 49 techniques. He once slashed off the 7 layers of celestial ditch with one single strike. "What does this mean?" Yi Futian whispered. He looked at the statue, as if there was very intimidating sword will hidden above the statue. Here was a more suitable place than Sword Comprehension Mountain to comprehend the path. This Wanlu Sword Lord should be the ancestor of the Sword Palace. Yi Futian looked at it for a moment, and walked to the other side. He saw a statue like a god. That was the Zhenshur Sky Lord, who made a breakthrough in the path, suppressed the world, and could shatter the 7 layers of the celestial ditch. Yi Futian frowned. He continued to look at the next statue. One of the statues was sitting and playing the zither. There were infinite notes floating in front of the statue. Yi Futian knew from a glance that this statue should be the ancestor of the Divine Music Palace. Yi Futian walked through the statues a little bit shocked. Eventually, he came to the front of the shrine, where there was no statue, but only a stone stele, which released very bright light of the Great Path, enveloping the whole shrine. Above the stele, there were 2 lines of writing. Have a heart for the world and establish a life for the people. These 2 lines of writing went straight into Yi Futian's mind, as if it turned into a voice echoing in his mind. It was like the sound of the Great Path, lingering for a long time. At this moment, Yi Futian felt a sense of awe. He was deeply moved, and his heart beat fast. Have a heart for the world and establish a life for the people. Inherit the sacred knowledge of the past, and create peace for the future. What kind of bravery was this? And what kind of place was this top 1 holy land in the higher heavens realm? He only knew that the Shangxiao Divine Palace preached to the world and was never involved in worldly affairs. It seemed to be a place for academic study, so after they opened the land of proving the way, all the top forces in the higher heavens realm were invited to enter. In each and every aspect, this place was indeed a respectable and pure holy land for cultivation. However, if it was just a holy land for cultivation, why did they have such a bold mind? What kind of mission did the Divine Palace carry? And undoubtedly, here was the most powerful place for cultivation in the Divine Palace. The statues of the ancestors of the 9 palaces stood here, and the mysterious life force of the Great Path enveloped the entire shrine. If so, why was it so difficult to set foot here? In his view, apart from Huang Zhong, for other disciples in the Divine Palace, even close disciples like Yi Tianyu and Li Daozi, it was not easy to set foot here. He remembered that when he was outside the shrine, there was a voice inside, asking him why he cultivated. He replied that he had no choice but to cultivate. After that, the other side didn't say anything. Was this question a test? Yi Futian looked at the gorgeous handwriting. It was as if it could be imprinted in his mind. He bowed slightly to the stele, full of respect. The boldness reflected in these 2 lines of handwriting was worthy of respect and awe. Yi Futian lifted his head, looked at the stele and said, "Sir, I have some doubts and need your advice." Although there was no one in the temple, there was the voice. Naturally, someone was here, even though he couldn't see it. Yi Futian's words echoed in the shrine. After a moment of silence, finally a voice sounded. "You can tell me," a hazy voice said. It was hard to tell where it came from. It seemed as if it was everywhere. "Where am I?" Yi Futian asked. "Divine Shrine. The ancestral land of the Divine Palace," the voice responded. "Who built it?" Yi Futian asked again. "Ancestors of the Divine Palace, of course," the other side said again. "Why was it built?" Yi Futian asked again. There was silence in the shrine again, and the response was no longer fast. "The answer is what you have seen," the other side responded after a moment of silence. Apparently, he was referring to the handwriting on the stone stele, for the world and for the people. "I don't know what you mean," Yi Futian said. He was not questioning it. He just didn't understand. The Divine Palace is the top 1 holy place for cultivation in the upper heavens realm, and even people from other realms come here to study. Since this is the case, why not let the disciples of the Divine Palace cultivate in this holy land of cultivation? Yi Futian asked again. "The world has imperfections. If they can't get here, it's useless for them to come," the other side responded. Yi Futian's heart trembled. There were imperfections in the world. On that day, on the Taishan mountain, when Lord Taishan made the breakthrough, he sighed and said that the world had imperfections. Why does the world have imperfections? Yi Futian asked again. He was more and more confused. The path of the heaven collapses, the other side said. Yi Futian's heart trembled. The path of heaven collapsed, so the world had imperfections. "Sir, you have said before that the world we see is not real. So what is the real world?" Yi Futian asked again. He didn't understand this sentence when it came from the shrine. "It's just like when I see you. You are not the real one. As for the real world, you need to explore it yourself." The other side responded with a certain expectation in its voice. "The purpose of this shrine is for us to comprehend these ancestors' paths, right? Why did Wang Zhong sit outside to cultivate?" Yi Futian continued. "The purpose here is not to comprehend the ancestors' paths," the other side said. Yi Futian was puzzled and asked, "What is it then?" "The world has imperfections, and the Great Path also has imperfections. The wheel of the Great Path made by cultivators is also flawed, not the perfect wheel of the Great Path. It can be said that there are obvious defects and cracks," the other side slowly said. Yi Futian was very shocked when he heard this. Even the divine wheels of the Great Path created by Renhuang figures are also flawed. Yi Futian asked. When reaching the Renhuang plain, one had already become a Renhuang of a district with great prestige. However, their divine wheels of the Great Path were also missing? This was unimaginable. Some people call it the ordinary wheel of the Great Path, and say that Wang Zhong wants to create an ultimate wheel of the Great Path. But in fact, in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, the divine wheel of the Great Path, which was built by the vast majority of Renhuang figures, could be said to be incomplete. It means this is the Great Path. It has imperfections. Yi Futian listened quietly. Did many Renhuang figures know this cruel fact? He said that the world he saw was not a complete world. So what was the truth of this world? The true divine wheel of the Great Path is the golden divine wheel. And what's more, it is the divine wheel that contains dazzling light. Once it blooms, it is dazzling. The Great Path is as one, and the sun and the moon shine together. The hazy voice sounded quite emotional. It said, "Only those who have seen the real divine wheel will know the flaws of the divine wheel of the Great Path." So, is this the meaning of this shrine? Yi Futian asked. He sensed that there seemed to be a very wonderful force in the shrine. It was likely that this force also cast the trees in the land of proving the way. That's exactly the case, the other side responded. The shrine has become a world itself, making up for the defects of the path. Here the path is not missing. If one can cultivate here and become a Renhuang, one can cast a complete divine wheel of the Great Path. Of course, it is much more difficult than casting an ordinary wheel of the Great Path. If one can't cross the river of the path and walk through the Golden Road, it is meaningless to cultivate here. However, you and Huangzhong were able to come here. Yi Futian was lost in thought. At this moment, many things came to his mind. It seemed that a lot of things were related to it. Or to say, from the beginning, his life had been given an extraordinary meaning. He was destined to be inextricably linked to this truth of the world. There must be a treasure in the shrine to make up for the defects of the path. If it is not the strength of the shrine itself, I am afraid it will bring bloody conflicts to the world, Yi Futian whispered. The moment his voice fell, suddenly, a strong pressure came onto him. Yi Futian looked normal, and calmly looked forward. He heard the voice continue. You are right. Although the palace is the top one holy place for the cultivation of the higher heavens realm, the threat always exists. Once the divine palace is weakened, it will bring many bloody conflicts. Ordinary people didn't know, but how could the top characters not know the secret of the imperfection of the world? There was a treasure in the divine palace to make up for the defects of the world. One could imagine how many people were coveting it. What Yi Futian said was very impolite. I get it, Yi Futian said and nodded. He didn't ask the impolite question deliberately. He just wanted to confirm one thing. He had experienced many things on his way of cultivation, and he was a secret himself. What do you get? The voice asked. Yi Futian looked at the steel in front of him. The world had imperfections, but the divine palace wanted to raise a cultivator without imperfections. Thank you for solving my confusion. Yi Futian saluted the steel slightly and said. Then he walked to a statue and sat down, cultivating with his eyes closed. He didn't answer, because it also was his own secret. The world had imperfections, but his path had no imperfections. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian understood it, he really did. Although he still did not understand the truth of the world, he knew that his path must be the perfect one. Yi Futian understood it, he really did. Although he still did not understand the truth of the world, he knew that his path must be the perfect one. Although he had many life spirits, his natal spirit was always just the world tree. It was the world ancient tree that gave him many life spirits, and endowed him with the gift of cultivating various paths, and even merging the great paths. This was probably related to his life experience. He was born to be extraordinary, and his godfather said that he was destined to be a king in the future. Although he did not know his identity, even a powerful person like Lord Taishian could not escape the fate of the world, and had sighed that the great path was lacking when he made the breakthrough. Even the strongest figures could not escape their fates. But Yi Futian could easily cross over his own from the moment of birth. He was very clear about that even in this imperfect world of cultivation, his path must be the perfect one. The divine wheel of the great path he would create when he set foot on the Renhuang plain in the future must also be a wheel without defects, which was to say, the extraordinary wheel of the great path in the eyes of the world. His life spirit could make up for the shortcomings of the world. He stopped talking because he knew what it meant. The divine palace had a treasure to make up for the defects of the path, so they always had to be alert to any crisis that might be brought by it. The reason why no one dared to touch it was because of the palace's power. But what about Yi Futian? If someone knew that his life spirit could make up for the defects of the path, he would instantly become a target. And how many people would be staring at him? Even the top figures in the cultivation world would be coveting it, and he might even end up dying without knowing who killed him. No wonder his godfather told him not to show his life spirit outside when he was young. Ordinary people might not know it, but those powerful people were likely to be able to spy something from him. The powerful person in this shrine could see through his disguise at one glance. And if his life spirit was revealed from his life palace, how could the person not perceive its peculiarity? Yi Futian didn't talk anymore, and just cultivated quietly in the corner, perceiving the true meaning of the ubiquitous Great Path. He was totally absorbed in cultivation, so the person would not doubt anything. As expected, after seeing Yi Futian cultivate, the powerful figure in the shrine also fell silent and did not speak again. Soon the shrine was quiet again. In the shrine, Yi Futian was comprehending and cultivating, and there was a roaring sound in his body. Outside the shrine, Huangzhong was also cultivating. More precisely, Huangzhong was comprehending, and what he wanted to do was to build what he thought was the perfect wheel of the Great Path. Only in this way could he live up to his knowledge and talent. The two were cultivating inside and outside the shrine. Many of the disciples in the divine palace were challenging the golden ancient road and the river of the path. Gai Shishir of the golden divine nation had tried many times and failed, but he was still trying. He could endure that the peerless talent of higher heaven's realm. Huangzhong passed it, but now, Yi Futian had also entered the shrine. Gai Shishir was not content. Ordinary people might not know the truth of this world, but as the top descendant of the golden divine nation, Gai Shishir knew more than ordinary people. The top one figure of the golden divine nation was a general of Donghuang the great emperor. So the senior leaders of the golden divine nation knew some truths in the world, and Gai Shishir also knew a little bit. He knew, so he wanted to be stronger. However, the golden ancient road was full of many powerful attacks, and although he could break through some, he had never been able to cross completely, and could only struggle again and again. In fact, what Gai Shishir had achieved was beyond ordinary cultivators' ability. More people could not even pass the river of the path, and just one step was extremely far to take. Although the shrine was just in front of them, for the disciples of the divine palace, it was endlessly distant and unreachable. At this time, many people inside and outside the river of the path looked forward, and many of them were disciples of the divine palace. Both Gai Shishir and Shunjing have crossed the river of the path. Did they enter the shrine? Many people discussed the matter amongst themselves. It's not an easy thing for them. Who is more promising to enter? Shunjing, someone said. In those two battles, he proved his unparalleled talent, and in the land of proving the way, he defeated Gai Shishir. This time Lord Taishian chose an extraordinary figure to inherit his swordsmanship, and he has gained fame on this trip to the divine palace. Is Shunjing's trip to shrine also guided by Lord Taishian? Someone wondered aloud. Very possible. Many people said and began to think. There was no doubt that the swordsman in training Shunjing of Taishian Mountain was a direct disciple of Lord Taishian. Everyone had known about it, and it did not require confirmation. If Lord Taishian had known that he got a direct disciple out of thin air, nobody knew what he would think. Perhaps he would turn the divine palace upside down. Or perhaps, Lord Taishian wouldn't mind at all. Time passed by, and Gai Shishir eventually gave up and returned, which made many people sigh. Some people asked Gai Shishir whether Shunjing of Taishian Mountain had entered the shrine, but Gai Shishir did not answer. He did not leave either. He chose to stay outside the river of the path. On this day, the last peak of Sword Comprehension Mountain suddenly gleamed with brilliant light, and then, the 81 peaks of the Sword Comprehension Mountain shone together, and the sword will rushed up to the sky. At this moment, every cultivator in the Sword Comprehension Mountain looked in one direction, their hearts beating fast. In the divine palace, There were also many warriors looking at the direction where Sword Comprehension Mountain was located, with light shining in their eyes. A new breakthrough, someone whispered. Another Sword Emperor was born. Was he before Huangzhong? Many people discussed, and their hearts trembled. Did the previous war really help him break his shackles? On the last sword peak of Jianshan, a figure like a sword stood proudly on the top of the mountain, and there was a monstrous sword wool flowing all over him. A terrifying sword river appeared between the sky and earth, and turned into a giant sword of the Great Path. That was the divine wheel of Great Path being cast. Li Daozi, who made the breakthrough, would become a sword emperor. Many people of the divine Swordly family were also here, and were all excited while watching this scene. Although there was a defeat, it did not affect Li Daozi's state of mind. No wonder he was the most outstanding figure of their generation in the divine Swordly family. On the top of One Sword Mountain, Wan Shuyi gazed in the direction of Li Daozi. Luoyue said, Li Daozi was defeated in that battle, but shortly after that, Li Daozi made a breakthrough. It seems that Li Daozi's heart of sword was clear, and was not affected at all, and the battle became his aid instead. He was looking for someone to quench the sword, and he only needed 2 more parts. After that battle, Shen Jing helped him complete one part, and only the last part was left. Now he accomplished it and succeeded, Wan Shuyi said. It is indeed outstanding. We still have a long way to go. Does this also prove that he is more outstanding? Luoyue whispered. Of course, Wan Shuyi nodded and said. Among 10,000 cultivators, you can only find one like Li Daozi in the world, and in the whole generation of the higher heavens realm, there were only 2 people like him. Now they are at the end of the river of the path. Can he enter the shrine? Luoyue asked. These days, there were many questions about whether or not Shen Jing could enter the shrine. Every day, people discussed this matter. Wan Shuyi looked towards Yaya, and remembered the conversation with her that day. At this moment, Yaya was still fully absorbed in her cultivation. She was a sword fanatic, and was marvelous at swordsmanship, and even such a person had unparalleled confidence in Shen Jing. So, he also had expectations. What if he really made it? After all, Shen Jing had been in there for many days. Many months had passed. Although many people had left River of the Path, there were more and more discussions about Yi Futian. The longer he stayed on the other side of the River of the Path, the more possible it was that he had entered the shrine. Gai Shishir's silence also made many people suspicious. On this day, there was no one here on the bank of the River of the Path, and only occasionally would someone come by to have a look. At this time, a figure came to the bank of River of the Path. He passed by and took a glance at the river. The towering palaces stood on both sides, but the whole space was still very quiet. Not yet, the man whispered, about to leave. He had no idea whether he had entered the shrine or not. But at this moment, just as he was just about to leave, he seemed to have noticed something. He paused a second and turned around, and saw a figure standing above a sword and slowly coming from the River of the Path. He's come out, he thought to himself. His pupils contracted, and his heart trembled. Swordsman in training Shen Jing of the Taishan Mountain walked out of the River of the Path. His temperament became more and more outstanding, and his life force was unfathomable. The sword floated above the River of the Path, and he steered the sword and came slowly towards this side at a steady speed. In his bright and deep eyes, there was no emotion. Seeing Yi Futian getting closer, he asked, My Taoist friend, have you gotten anything during this trip? Yi Futian looked up at him, smiling, and did not respond. Have you ever entered there? The man asked Yi Futian. Since Yi Futian didn't answer, instead of turning around, he just asked directly, Where is there? Yi Futian asked. The ancestral land. The person stared at Yi Futian and said, Maybe I've been there, Yi Futian whispered. He came up onto the bank of River of the Path. The man gave him a deep look, and then flashed away in the air. Soon, the whole divine palace knew that Yi Futian walked out of the River of the Path. Suddenly, the divine palace became noisy again. One after another, their bodies flickered, and the cultivators all moved in the same direction, toward where Yi Futian appeared. In the divine palace, the news made the whole palace boiling. Shen Jing of the Taishan Mountain entered the ancestral land of the divine palace, the shrine. For many years, only one disciple of the divine palace had stepped into the shrine. This person was still cultivating in the ancestral shrine. Huang Zhong, the top one figure among the descendants in the upper heavens realm. Today there was one more person. Many people in the palace were even reluctant to believe it. Some cultivators in seclusion came out and wanted to ask Yi Futian in person. At this time, in the divine palace, Yi Futian walked towards the direction of Sword Comprehension Mountain. This trip to the divine palace was perfect for him. He completed all tasks and even had unexpected gains. It was time to leave after cultivating in the divine palace for so long. However, people kept coming towards him. Around him, disciples of the divine palace appeared one after another, all staring at him. The emotion in their stares was complicated, but no one stepped forward. They all just looked at him, as if he was a monster. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian came out and headed toward Sword Comprehension Mountain. He came on this trip as a swordsman from Taishan Mountain. Besides Yaya, the others that he was acquainted with were those from Taishan Mountain, like Wan Shuyi, Luoyue, and Little Phoenix. Besides Little Phoenix, there were several others who were cultivating at Sword Comprehension Mountain, which was the place to cultivate swordsmanship. Yi Futian came out and headed toward Sword Comprehension Mountain. He came on this trip as a swordsman from Taishan Mountain. Besides Yaya, the others that he was acquainted with were those from Taishan Mountain, like Wan Shuyi, Luoyue, and Little Phoenix. Besides Little Phoenix, there were several others who were cultivating at Sword Comprehension Mountain, which was the place to cultivate swordsmanship. As for the others from Taishan Mountain, they were outside of his control. Disciples of the divine palace continued gathering and appearing beside him. Some disciples approached and asked, "Shenjing, did you really get into the ancestral land?" To the divine palace, this news was too shocking, especially for the direct disciples. They knew how difficult it was to enter the ancestral land. Now Yi Futian claimed that he had entered the ancestral land. One could imagine the shock felt by the disciples of the divine palace. An outsider had stepped into their ancestral land of the divine palace? The elders of the divine palace did not stop him? Huang Zhong, who was at the ancestral land, didn't stop Yi Futian either? With Huang Zhong's realm of strength, who below Rinhunag could surpass him? What answer you wish for is the answer you'll get. Yi Futian glanced at the other. He no longer wished to respond anymore. There were still so many questions, and if he said that he didn't go, no one wouldn't believe him. If so, there was no need to spend time chattering. The people of the divine palace could think whatever they wanted to. Since none of the great figures at the divine palace minded, the thoughts of the disciples of the divine palace were completely unimportant. Thus Yi Futian did not care either. The words carved on the stone tablet in the divine temple perhaps were the foundation of the divine palace. Brother Shen, what was in the divine temple of ancestral land? Someone walked up to Yi Futian and asked, his eyes full of curiosity. Seeing this person, everyone was speechless for the moment. It was Zhuang Hong. This guy actually thought of exploring the secrets of the ancestral land from Shenjing. Indeed, apart from the key figures of the divine palace, probably only Huang Zhong would know what was in the ancestral land. Now that Yi Futian had gone inside, how could they not be curious? This is the secret of the divine palace. Should I keep it or tell you? Yi Futian looked at Zhuang Hong with a smile. Zhuang Hong looked stunned. He glared at Yi Futian and said in a low voice, "You are an ass." Since he said that it was the secret of the divine palace, as the direct disciple of the divine palace, how could he dare to question any further? It would amount to probing secrets of the divine palace. Why couldn't this guy just reveal a little? Just a little bit. Try hard to enter it, and there you will see the real divine palace. Yi Futian patted Zhuang Hong's shoulder, which made Zhuang Hong's eyes shine with excitement as he stared at Yi Futian. How thrilling was his suggestion! Only he was even more curious. What would the real divine palace look like? Was the divine palace that they saw a fake? I want to, but I am afraid I won't be able to. Zhuanghong mumbled to himself. The Path River was not so easy to cross. Yi Futian didn't say anything more. It was really difficult to get through. At this time, Yi Futian stopped and saw a figure standing in front of them. He was blocking Yi Futian's way forward. Yin Sui. Yi Futian looked at the person in front of him. It turned out to be an acquaintance. This person had traveled to the heavenly mandate realm with Yi Tianyu, and was a good friend of Yi Tianyu. He was a disciple of the palace lord of divine music palace. Now Yin Sui, who had already entered Nirvana realm, was blocking his way. Yin Sui, disciple of divine music palace. Yin Sui bowed slightly to Yi Futian, his demeanor cordial and measured. No need for formality since you are blocking the way, Yi Futian said with a smile. Blocking the road was, in itself, an act of rudeness. What can I do for you? Yi Futian asked. Recently, I have been cultivating in solitude. After I came out, I heard that a legend had appeared in the land of proving the way. I heard that Shen Jing, a swordsman from Taishan Mountain, and a disciple of Lord Taishan, defeated many powerful cultivators with one sword. I heard that even Li Daozi was no exception. Furthermore, he had entered the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, which is rumored to contain the ultimate method of the Divine Palace. Since Brother Shen had returned from the ancestral land, and maybe I'm overestimating my own strength, I would love to experience what Brother Shen learned in the ancestral land. Yin Sui spoke politely. Even if it was a challenge, he was still courteous, exhibiting great diplomacy. At this time, many disciples of Divine Music Palace and Yi Tianyu were also present. They looked at Yin Sui, and Yi Tianyu and Yin Sui were quite familiar with one another. Having seen the battle between Yi Futian and Li Daozi, he was afraid that Yin Shi might not come out of this battle victorious. However, Yin Sui had always been arrogant. If he wanted to try, he couldn't really stop it. So he didn't speak, but looked on quietly. In fact, many people thought that Yin Sui would definitely be defeated. After all, Li Daozi was more famous than Yin Sui. Recently, Yi Futian had returned from ancestral land, so Yin Sui could not possibly be his equal. However, it was possible to see whether or not Yi Futian's strength had improved any more, and whether or not he had gained anything in the ancestral land. You cannot. Yi Futian glanced at Yin Sui. His answer was straightforward, and he didn't give Yin Sui any leeway. He was also wondering, when did the people in the Divine Palace hear that he was a disciple of Lord Taishan? He had only met Lord Taishan once that day, and to call him a disciple was somewhat preposterous. What would Lord Taishan think if he knew? Would he think that Yi Futian was leading people to believe he was his disciple? Hearing Yi Futian's words, everyone in the Divine Palace was silent for a while. He was truly blunt about it. Yin Sui did not expect Yi Futian to be so frank, dismissing him with just 2 words. You cannot. Please advise, Yin Sui said. His voice was solemn. As his voice fell, lingering divine sounds of the great path meandered in the air. It turned into infinite musical notes, complementing the way of heaven and earth. A series of golden characters turned into terrible lightning and attacked Yi Futian. The roaring golden characters turned into a salient golden-winged rock, hacking through the void. Yi Futian was on the move, and everyone saw elusive afterimages, like golden lightning, sail across the void as a squealing sound was heard. Pooh! Everyone saw that the golden remnant of the shadow passed through the golden-winged rock. Yi Futian actually directly split open the golden-winged rock using his hand in place of a sword. His entire body was dazzling, and he radiated a terrible divine light of swordsmanship. His finger pointed forward at Yin Sui. In this instant, the divine sound of the great path resonated throughout heaven and earth in harmony with Yi Futian's finger. It created a supreme swordsmanship. Divine sound. Yin Sui's expression changed to one with shock as the finger descended instantly and landed. With a popping sound, his body flew backward, and blood dripped down along his hanging arms. In that momentary confrontation, without much drama, Yin Sui bled from the corners of his mouth. His clothes were also stained with blood. His arms hung helplessly as blood continued to drip down. The hearts of many trembled. Though they could not see the swordplay clearly, they felt the divine sound and the swordsmanship. As for their true strength, It was unfathomable to many disciples of the divine palace. He has cultivated the divine sound, entered into the ancestral land, and the method of the divine palace truly exists in the ancestral land. Everyone was shocked. They focused intently on Yi Futian. If so, didn't that imply this swordsman from Taishan Mountain was stealing the arts from the divine palace? Yi Futian continued forward, walking past Yin Sui as his arms were just hanging there. He let Yi Futian walk past him, unable to do anything to stop him. Although the disciples of Divine Music Palace were not happy about it, no one tried to stop him again. With Yi Futian's strength, except for the one who was cultivating at the ancestral land, no one was certain they could stop him. Yi Futian continued ahead like a sword until he had arrived at Sword Comprehension Mountain. A person stood on top of the first mountain of Sword Comprehension, mountain like a sword from the heavens, looking down at Yi Futian. Yi Futian raised his head to look up at him. It was Li Daozi of the divine swordly family, and the breath exuded from his body was the breath of Renhuang. Proving the way of Renhuang, Yi Futian said to himself. Whether it was a strengthening of his power or a transformation of his mind, he viewed Renhuang differently than he did before. Once, Emperor Xia and Emperor Li were legends to him, mythical figures who were unattainable. But today and right now, he felt that Renhuang was not so far out of reach, especially when the person who had lost to him not long ago had now entered the realm of Renhuang. Naturally, he was not likely to be impressed. It was only that different people experienced the way on different timelines, and Li Daozi's realm was deeper than his. Yi Futian didn't speak. He only looked up at Li Daozi, who seemed to be waiting for him here. Li Daozi looked at Yi Futian. Although he had entered into Renhuang, Yi Futian had entered the ancestral land of the divine palace. Which was more difficult? Realm of Renhuang. There were many at the divine palace, but how many could enter the ancestral land? Therefore, there was nothing much to be proud of. Congratulations, Li Daozi said. Same. Yi Futian smiled. It looked like that Li Daozi was not here to fight. Indeed, it would be meaningless to pick a fight after the other had already entered Renhuang. Thank you for trying the sword, Li Daozi said again. He then shape-shifted into a sword and flickered away. Yi Futian smiled. This heir of the divine swordly family was kind of interesting. He continued to move forward and entered the Sword Comprehension Mountain. Wan Shuyi and Luoyue looked at him with emotions in their hearts. Since this guy came down from the mountain, he began to show his edge and was becoming more and more legendary. Was this still the Shenjing that they knew? They hardly seemed to be the same person. Yi Futian smiled at them and walked forward until he reached the last sword mountain. The sword will float upon him, and the aurora of the sword shot out from his eyes. After a while, he turned and said to Wan Shuyi and Luoyue, "Let's go back," he said. Very well. The two nodded and went along with him. Yaya also followed quietly. As soon as they turned around and started walking, they saw that the last sword peak of Sword Comprehension Mountain was shining with a brilliant sword light that rushed toward the sky. Then 81 sword mountains lit up at the same time. The sword chi roared and circled the heavens as if to send them off. Everyone's heart beat violently, especially those disciples from Sword Palace of the Divine Palace. Without being in the realm of the Sword Emperor, the 81 swords had been unlocked. Even the last one was the same. This was another new record. No one had done it before. What exactly did he obtain in the ancestral land of the Divine Palace? In the void, Li Daozi, who was leaving, turned his head and glanced toward Sword Comprehension Mountain, many turbulent emotions in his heart. Not an emperor, yet he unlocked the 81 swords. Compared to him, he seemed to be lesser again. This title of Sword Emperor was nothing to be proud of at all. It seemed that, in the future, he still needed to concentrate on cultivation. Yi Futian walked toward the outside of the Divine Palace, prepared to leave. Many of those who had followed him into the Divine Palace were also leaving with him. After having stayed at the Divine Palace for many days, partially for his own private reasons. However, now that what needed to be done had been done, and since he didn't choose to cultivate at the Divine Palace, it was time to go back. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., Please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In Linqiao City, it had been a long time since the guides from the Divine Palace had led the cultivators into the Sea of the Path. Since then many had returned, bringing with them news and rumors. In Linqiao City, it had been a long time since the guides from the Divine Palace had led the cultivators into the Sea of the Path. Since then many had returned, bringing with them news and rumors. For example, in the Battle of the Proving Ground in the Sea of the Path, the strongest person was not Li Sun of the Divine Swordly family, nor Qin Zong of the Sky-Burying God clan, nor Gai Shi, the genius talent of the Golden Divine Nation. It was not even a disciple of the Divine Palace. Instead, it was someone that few people had heard of before. A swordsman from Taishan Mountain, Shen Jing. This swordsman from Taishan Mountain, who was famed in one battle, had defeated all enemies in the land of Proving the Way. He alone had plundered the Divine Tree of Comprehension. Because of him, everyone from Taishan Mountain was able to get into the Divine Tree to comprehend. Afterward, as many cultivators had entered the Divine Palace, less and less news made way to Linqiao City. Furthermore, although many had returned, those key characters, such as Shen Jing, who became famous in the one battle, as well as Gai Shi and Qin Zong, had not been seen since. Could it be that they had all entered the Divine Palace to cultivate? Many had already left, but some were still cultivating in Linqiao City, waiting for news. They wanted to see what would happen this time. Naturally, all the top forces were stationed at Linqiao City as well. At this time, on the coast of the Sea of the Path, many walked on the beach, and some enjoyed a drink or two in the taverns, looking out over that vast Sea of the Path. It was said that this sea was endless. The Divine Palace was located above the Fei Mountain of the Sea of the Path, but for those who were not disciples of the Divine Palace, unless taken by guides, there was no other way to enter the Divine Palace. Although there were countless who longed for it, they had no chance to enter. At this time, there was a sudden sound that came from the coast. Many turned their attention that way, looking in the direction of the Sea of the Path. Curiosity flashed through their eyes as they looked at the sea. Their eyes became brighter and brighter until finally, they saw in the distance, where the sea met the sky, figures sailing toward them. It was as if they were coming from the other end of the sky. They are back. Someone trembled inwardly. Those who had gone to the Divine Palace had returned from the Sea of the Path. Many heard whispers and turned to look over there. They saw that the group was not together, but was made of different camps in different positions. But from a distance, it was as if they were all together. However, as they got closer, they could be seen more clearly. Cultivators of the Divine Swordly family are here. And the cultivators of the Sky-Burying God clan. Everyone talked amongst themselves. Sure enough, it was the return of those who had gone to the Divine Palace to prove the way. It was unknown what they had gained on this trip. Who is Shenjing? Someone inquired. Many did not yet know who Shenjing was. Everyone searched and quickly, their gaze fell in one direction. Over there Futian, Wan Shuyi, and Luoyue were together. However, there were still a few others from Taishan Mountain, who were willingly following behind them. There are the people from Taishan Mountain, and the handsome figure in the front must be Shenjing. He became the apparent leader of those from Taishan Mountain. Someone pointed in the direction of Futian. Suddenly many were sizing him up. When he entered the Sea of the Path before, no one had noticed him. But now he became famous because of the one battle. So naturally he was the focus of all the attention. Futian and his party went all the way from the Sea of the Path, escorted by the guides from the Divine Palace. When everyone got to the shore, the guides from the Divine Palace turned around and left in the boat, carefree and at ease. Futian stood on a dinghy. The wind from the sea caressed his robe. As the dinghy docked, he stepped off and said, "Let's go back to Taishan Mountain." "Very well." Wan Shuyi nodded. Futian's body flickered, and he landed on the shore. The group walked forward, preparing for their trip back home. In the Sea of the Path, people came through the air one after another, and they all went ashore. The people of Linqiao City wanted to know what happened, but had no idea who they should ask. At this time, Someone realized that all the cultivators had gone in the same direction. Someone's eyes sparkled, and a faint smile flashed across their face. Quite interesting, they said. Clearly, he had realized something, and immediately caught up with the group. Yi Futian and his group kept moving forward, and they quickly reached Linxiao City. He did not hurry though. Instead, his brows were knitted together. Next to Yi Futian, Wan Shuyi and Luoyue took on a cold expression. Obviously, they both discovered that after they landed from the Sea of the Path, many did not go back, but had followed them instead. Had some kind of tacit agreement had been made, or had it been discussed in the Divine Palace in advance? More and more people had now gathered inside Linxiao City, and many cultivators, while sensing something unusual, couldn't help but become greatly interested. It seemed that although everyone had returned from the Divine Palace, the matter was far from over. There was going to be a show to see. They are here for you. Wan Shuyi transmitted his voice to Yi Futian. It was easy to understand that in the Divine Palace, Yi Futian's strength was unparalleled, and that at the Divine Palace, it was not easy for anyone to touch him. Now that everyone had returned, they would soon be on their way back home, just as Yi Futian would also go back to Taishan Mountain. If they did not make a move now, they would not have another chance. No one would forget that Yi Futian, while in the land of proving the way, had taken many fruits of the way himself. Those fruits were fruits that could form the body of the Great Path. It was especially helpful to impact the realm of Renhuang. In addition, Yi Futian had obtained the inheritance of the Divine Palace in the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, which was equally alluring to the others. Therefore, if everyone wanted to make a move on Yi Futian together, it would not be so unexpected. Yi Futian nodded as he understood that as long as the people of the divine capital of Xiling was there, Luo Yuming must have hated him and wanted to slaughter him mercilessly. Now the people of the divine capital of Xiling were in the dark. Angai Shir of the Golden Divine Nation had followed along as well. In addition, there were some other cultivators whom Yi Futian didn't even know. They had fought for the fruits of the way in the land of proving the way with him. Their realms were all unfathomable, and they were characters who had reached the top of the Saint Plain. They all desired the fruits. Presumably, they already had the same idea, and now that they had left the Divine Palace, they wouldn't want to miss the opportunity again. Yi Futian not only did not hurry to escape, but slowed down his pace instead, casually walking around the city. His spiritual will shrouded his surroundings. Unconsciously, the space where Yi Futian was became somewhat suppressing for others, and those around him pulled away. It was as if they could predict what would happen. "You don't need to follow me," Yi Futian said. His body suddenly accelerated. He ditched Wan Shuyi and the others in an instant. "You." Luoyue saw this and pointed forward. But Wan Shuyi caught her hand and shook his head. If those who were to attack were the top genius figures, they wouldn't be of great use to him. Except for Wan Shuyi's extraordinary comprehension of swordsmanship, everyone else might actually become Yi Futian's burden. And with Yi Futian's unparalleled strength, even if he was on his own, it was far easier to deal with him than with them. That at least, there wouldn't be any constraints. Yi Futian walked forward alone, sword will whistling around him. His spiritual will shrouded the vast void around him. The wind and clouds roared above the sky, and there was a terrible death light lurking about. There were even places where bright golden divine light shot out, falling down with frightening breath. In the void, Gai Shir and the other cultivators were there. Yi Futian wouldn't be able to get away so easily. He took away the fruits of the way, and entered the ancestral land of the Divine Palace. He was not a disciple of the Divine Palace. Thus, even if he was taken, it would have nothing to do with the Divine Palace. Moreover, they also wanted to know what secrets were hidden in the ancestral land of the Divine Palace. Boom! Divine thunder rolled above the sky like the apocalypse was upon them. Thunder clouds roared, blocking the sun overhead. A mighty power of Renhuang permeated and cascaded down, exuding a strong sense of threat. "Shenjing, you alone took possession of the fruits of the way, a greedy act. Since you don't cultivate in many of the methods, why don't you give up some of the fruits, and we'll leave?" A voice said from the void, obviously unwilling to start a war with Yi Futian. However, for the opportunity of proving the way, they had to fight for it. The might of the Renhuang divine implement. Yi Futian glanced up at the void. The land of proving the way strictly forbade the use of Renhuang-level divine implements. But in reality, many of those who entered the Sea of the Path were powerful figures who were equipped with Renhuang-level divine implements. Now outside of the Sea of the Path, if it was strength alone, no one could best Yi Futian. But this was a pillage who would care to be fair. Clearly, any means would be used. Yi Futian's expression was cold and indifferent. Sword will circled his body, and there was murderous intent in his eyes. They were out of the land of proving the way, and they were all out of the divine palace. Were they still unwilling to give up? The fact that this person was in possession of a Renhuang-level divine implement didn't bother him. What alarmed him was that someone like Gai Shi, whose divine implement must be supremely powerful, was surely extremely powerful. And these people were staring at him. They could strike at any time. Respectfully, I would like to advise everyone to leave now, and I will forget that this ever happened. However, if you make a move, I will see that as an attempt on my life. For those people, I will kill without exception. Yi Futian's voice was extremely cold. If these people were serious about threatening his life, he would be merciless. As soon as I have the fruit, I will leave immediately. I only want one. The man in the void said in a cold and indifferent voice. Yi Futian's spiritual will captured and locked onto the speaker. It was a middle-aged cultivator holding a divine hammer. Thunder and lightning filled the sky aggressively, and with absolute dominance. Divine light of infinite thunder, and lightning of heaven and earth gathered, and turned into a chain of thunder. At this time, Yi Futian looked up at the divine thunder tumbling above the sky. Bright sword light of murder shot out from his eyes, piercing the void, and into the other man's eyes. When the middle-aged man saw those eyes, he felt that his spiritual will was sliced through by swordsmanship. It was glaring and blinding. You asked for it. A cold voice sounded in his mind, making him feel a very strong threat. At the same time that the voice fell, Yi Futian's body turned into an afterimage. Its dazzling sword light traversed the void, and rushed into the thundering sky with extreme speed. The middle-aged man changed the expression on his face. The divine thunder was extremely violent. He raised his arm and blasted out divine light of thunder that swept through the void. But the residual shadow blinked and disappeared. Pust! A very slight sound emerged as the destructive thunder rolled and roared between heaven and earth. But the man's eyes showed tremendous fear. The divine implement fell from his hands. He held his neck with both hands as a crack appeared, and blood flowed out, and stained his hands red. The sword was that fast. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In the void, the sword in Yi Futian's hand was stained with blood as he looked at the figure falling from the sky. This strike not only slashed the throat, but also contained the power to slash the soul. So the other was unable to save himself. In the void, the sword in Yi Futian's hand was stained with blood as he looked at the figure falling from the sky. This strike not only slashed the throat, but also contained the power to slash the soul. So the other was unable to save himself. Now that these many cultivators had come to suppress him in unison, wanting to leverage divine implements to smite him and take away the fruits, if he didn't make an example of him, they would most likely be undeterred. His hand made a grabbing motion in the air, and Yi Futian captured the divine implement of the other, then took it as his own. That suffocating will of the way still shrouded the space, but no one wanted to be that bold again. It was as if they were cowed by Yi Futian's sword. A sword traversed the void and directly slashed the throat of someone who was at the top nirvana plane, holding the Renhuang divine implement. After having cultivated in the ancestral land of the divine palace, Yi Futian should be even stronger than when he fought with Li Daozi. His sword was no longer confined to the fleeing years of the divine will. The sword that had been deployed just now was the ultimate fast sword. Those who want to die, continue as you wish, Yi Futian said as he walked forward, holding the sword with one hand. He stepped into the void, and the vast void resonated with the nether swordsmanship. It was extremely sharp. The The sword will of the heavens clamored. In Linqiao City, in the vast and endless area beneath the sky, countless people were shocked. Many swordsmen felt that their swords, and their own sword will were also resonating with that swordsmanship. It was as if all the swords of the world were about to be controlled by it. Shenjing, on this trip to the Divine Palace to prove the way, everyone competed for the fruits of the way, which was the opportunity bestowed by the Divine Palace. People of all principalities were to share the opportunity, but you snatched all the fruits for yourself. You were selfish, and you didn't think about anybody else, said a cold and indifferent voice. The speaker was Gai Shishir. He stood higher up in the void as the golden divine light of his body cascaded down. Yi Futian's sword deterred all the cultivators, and no one dared to come forward. It looked like he had come out himself. But in reality, what he wanted was not as simple as the fruits of the way. After hearing Gai Shishir's words, many felt the same sense of outrage. This Yi Futian was indeed too domineering. He had seized many fruits of the way. He had taken advantage of the opportunity from the Divine Palace to prove the way. This rather selfish behavior was unjustifiable to the others. Yi Futian glanced up at the sky, and a sarcastic smile flashed in his sharpened eyes. He said, "What a joke. If it weren't for me, other people could obtain the fruits? Don't forget who occupied the divine tree of comprehension at the time. Who had gotten it then? You were one of them. Exactly whose way did I block when I went alone to take from the divine tree of comprehension? Gai Shishir, if you want to fight then fight. Don't bother encouraging the others to die along with you. It's really beneath your reputation and the divine nations," Yi Futian said sarcastically. He knew of the reputation of the golden divine nation, and Gai Shishir's talent was truly outstanding. However, his conduct was rather unbecoming. Swordsman Li Dozi of the divine swordly family, in comparison, was more straightforward, and was not faking anything. "You asked to fight. I will oblige you," Gai Shishir said loud and clear. His voice shook the void. As his voice fell, golden divine lights descended from the sky, seemingly transforming into many golden divine spears that slaughtered downward. A terrifying divine power descended. Giant faces appeared in the sky. They were golden faces. There were faint traces of ancient golden gods in the sky. They sighed. A mighty will of the way came down, and shrouded Yi Futian. Gai Shishir took out a divine implement, which was a golden spear. The divine light that puffed out from within seemed to be able to break through the heavens above. Just the golden brilliance that it released was enough to hurt the eyes of those who beheld it. Gai Shishir, at this moment, under the glory of the golden divine spear, seemed to be covered in golden armor. He looked just like a god of war would. The clothes on his body were shining and shimmering with a golden luster. How strong is the divine implement? Many raised their hands to shield their eyes. Even though they were hundreds of miles apart, the people of Linqiao City felt it as their eyes were being stung by the divine light of that divine implement. The might of Wei contained there was unfathomable in its horrific power. Between heaven and earth, the golden divine light flowed and converged upon the spear. The golden divine spear seemed to be burning with the golden divine light. Yi Futian's eyes were extremely grave. What mighty power was the golden divine nation? They were one of the most powerful forces in the upper heavens realm, definitely among the top 3. Outside of the divine palace, there was no other principality that dared to say that it could crush the golden divine nation. One could only imagine what powerful divine implement the golden divine nation would bestow upon Gai Shishir, who was the finest of its descendants. No other Renhuang divine implement would be comparable. At the beginning of the year, I went to Taishan Mountain to visit Lord Taishan. Even now, I am reluctant to smite the people of Taishan Mountain. If you were not so greedy and had been willing to divide the fruits equally, I might have forgiven you, Gai Shishir said. There was a righteous air about him. He acted as if he was serving justice in this matter. Since when does a loser dare to be so arrogant? Yi Futian said mockingly. Upon hearing his words, Gai Shishir raised the divine spear. Its might of divine light pierced the void. Golden divine light shot out from his eyes as he replied coldly. Since you are hard-headed and refuse to come to your senses, the spear of the gods will represent the will of the gods. The divine light will wash away your sins. His voice was solemn like a real god. Above the sky, many divine illusions let out a sigh. In an instant, the pressure of might soared to the limit. This kind of unparalleled power was unrivaled below Renhuang realm. Even those at the top of the Nirvana plane, who surrounded Yi Futian, were terrified. Gai Shishir at this moment was too frightening. If he launched his attack against them, he would be unstoppable. There was also what Gai Shishir had said. It seemed as if those words were from the powerful divine nation, from divine general, who had served under Donghuan the Great. Only those kinds of characters could have such a vision to speak such aspirational words. The spear of the gods would represent the will of heaven, and the divine light would wash away all sins. The divine light bloomed as the divine spear in Gai Shishir's hand pierced toward Yi Futian. With the sigh of the divine god, all the divine lights penetrated the sky and earth. They fell at the same time, covering the sky and shielding the sun. They slammed toward Yi Futian's body in an instant. Sword screamed in the sky. An infinite sword will of the world resonated, and turned into a sword of slaughter, which penetrated the void. It collided with the divine light, and collapsed and shattered together. A terrible storm of destruction manifested in the void as the endless golden divine light sprinkled down. Yi Futian felt a strong oppressive force, and those golden divine lights seemed to be inexhaustible, suppressing him. What was even more terrifying was that Gai Shishir came with the divine spear through the void, and the divine spear stabbed out forcefully, intending to nail Yi Futian to the void. Looking at the dazzling figure that bathed in the golden divine light, Yi Futian had no doubt that Gai Shishir would really kill him if he wanted to. His daring confidence came from the power of the golden divine nation that feared nothing and no one. The void seemed to split as the golden divine spear opened up a road of the great path. Yi Futian controlled the flow of the sword river in the great path, but everything was still annihilated and pulverized. He was unable to block the power of the divine spear. Even if Gai Shishir was not able to mobilize too much of its power, as a supreme Renhuang divine implement, the spear was still extremely fearsome. Under the spear of the gods, everything would be pulverized. In an instant, it had already descended on Yi Futian. Many people endured the sting to continue looking at the battlefield. Under the dazzling divine light, it was almost difficult to see what was happening. With this blow, would the magnificent swordsman from Taishan Mountain perish? Bang! A dull sound came out, shattering the sky and earth as the divine light exploded. It swept out toward the external surroundings, and turned into a terrible light screen of the great path. Many couldn't help but continue staring there. The golden divine spear did not pierce through Yi Futian's body. Around Yi Futian, an immense and sacred divine elephant appeared. It let out a booming sound. At this moment, the great path seemed to collapse and shatter. The roars continued resounding between heaven and earth. The towering divine elephant stood like a demon god. An inexhaustible demon god's brilliance flowed through the heavens. Yi Futian's whole body was shining, and the bones of the supreme elephant emperor integrated into the life spirit of the divine elephant, so that the battle form of the life spirit contained the incredible power of the demon emperor. Gai Shishir's attack with the most powerful Renhuang divine implement forced him to resort to the power of the divine elephant. Gai Shishir himself was one of the top geniuses in the upper heavens realm. Coupled with the great divine implement of the golden divine nation, how powerful could he be? Anyone under Renhuang could be killed. Therefore, Yi Futian could only summon the power of the supreme bones of the divine elephant emperor to counter the slaughter from the other's divine spear. Suffocating pressure of might enveloped the sky, and countless eyes were fixed in the direction of the battlefield. What was that? Life spirit. Divine elephant life spirit. Wasn't Shunjing a swordsman from Taishan Mountain? His life spirit seemed to be more than just sword. But, at a critical point, he no longer contended with just sword alone, instead deploying the life spirit of the divine elephant. In this life spirit, it also seemed to be integrated into the magic of the demon emperor, which accounted for its incredible defense power, which could block the attack of the divine spear. This is the power of the divine elephant. I have heard that the land of the demon realm in the heavenly mandate realm is where the divine elephant clan resides. What an incredible ability! Among those who watched, there were some who were well informed. A look of surprise hung on their faces. Was Shun Jing from Heavenly Mandate Realm? Divine Elephant. Gai Shirshir also looked down at Yi Futian. His golden eyes were extremely sharp. He asked, "Who are you?" The sound of elephants trumpeting oscillated in the void, just like the sound of the Great Path. The sky seems to be crushed under this sonorous sound. Bang! With a loud boom, the divine elephant stepped into the sky, repelling Gai Shirshir's body with its shockwaves. Yi Futian raised his fist and blasted out. It was divine elephant split the sky. Giant shadows of divine elephants trampled across the sky. The fist aurora suppressed the void, and the divine light upon Gai Shirshir continued to shine. The divine spear in his hand continued to strike, and countless divine spears collided with the divine elephants and fist aurora. The battlefield where the two made their exchanges gave out loud rumbling sounds. So powerful. Everyone's heart trembled. Gai Shirshir had released the sigh of the divine god, and he couldn't be overpowered even with the use of such terrifying divine implements. He had even been repelled while Yi Futian continued his counterattacks. Such combative power was definitely at the top of nirvana. Few possessed such strength. The two separated. Yi Futian wore an expression of cold indifference, and Gai Shirshir looked at him, as cold murderous intent flashed through his golden eyes. It seems that there are other secrets you carry. If so, the inheritance of the divine palace and the fruits of the way definitely should not be taken by you. As he finished speaking, his eyes glanced at those who were present. He asked, "What are you waiting for? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.